Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at Ask Adam Torres to keep up with our book releases, book tour schedule, all that other good stuff. And as always, if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Kiva Schuler on the line, and she is CEO and co-founder over at the Jai Institute for Parenting. Kiva, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Adam.
All right, Kiva. So I'm excited to get into today's topic. So we will be talking about Jai, of course, and your goal to certify 1,000 coaches. So I mean that's a big goal, and we'll get into some of the reasons behind that. But maybe before we get started with that, and before we go into Jai, let's just start with your background. So how did you get started really on this entrepreneurial path?
I think like many people who become parents, I was working in corporate, spending lots of time on the road and, didn't really have a lot of control or freedom over my own time. And so when I had my kids, I remember this moment of, coming home from work in my fancy suit. I worked in finance. And, the nanny was sitting there on the porch with them. They'd been to the beach and they were playing. And I just thought to myself, this is crazy. I want to be the one to do those things. To answer your question, I don't think I would have considered myself an entrepreneur until really recently. I mean, when I started working for myself, what I would call self-employment, my goal was just to make enough money to, send them to the schools that I wanted. And, over time that's evolved. But I think it's a really important distinction because to me, entrepreneurship it's building something that actually doesn't require you. It often involves other investments. It's a more scaled and more honestly risky idea of how to invest your time, intellectual capacity, your money than self-employment or being a business owner where you're looking how to exchange your time for money in a way that works for you. And I think that's a better first step, especially for a lot of parents, quite frankly.
This whole idea of, and I know, by the way, that I believe you're going on your 5th year in business. Am I right? Congrats
Oh
on
no,
that.
like 11th.
Oh, 11th year in business.
I'm a slow grower.
I love it. I don't know how I got that one wrong, but I'll tell you what, that's awesome. And I love I love this concept of either trading your time for money, or I've heard other people say it may be like buying a job. So they're basically saying like, they're buying a job. They're not looking, they just want to maintain their same quality of living, but working for themselves. So they have flexibility of schedule. And then that next step is, of course, as you mentioned, like making something that's actually scalable. What kind of advice would you give to that person that's maybe, a little bit further along, or excuse me, further behind than they are in you? So meaning that maybe they're just getting started. Maybe they're just thinking about leaving that corporate world, because that's a scary thing. Like to leave your job in finance, to leave your identity there and to start something on your own, it's a scary thing. What kind of advice would you give them on making that leap?
Yeah, I mean, I think, at the beginning, it is really useful to think about exchanging dollars for hours. I think in the world, especially of online marketing and, this whole world of, kind of entrepreneurial rock star, that somehow we have an idea that if we're exchanging our time for money, we're doing it wrong. I have found that it's really useful to build a business one step at a time. And each level has a proof of concept phase. And very often at the beginning, the way to get proof of concept is to work directly with your ideal clients to earn the gravitas, quite frankly, of knowing that you can deliver on the promises that you make to the people that you serve. And for some people, that's enough. For me, for many years, while my kids were, growing up and in school, it was enough for me to work with clients and make a great living while they were in school and be the one to pick them up for every day. $1 million business has $1 million problems. And so I think it's, what I would say is like, give yourself permission to grow slow and to not have to be built in a day.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, let's get into Jai. So I want to talk more about Jai and your concept for this. So first off, what was the inspiration behind creating this?
Well, what's interesting is, I had, like many of us, a very tumultuous childhood. My parents split up when I was really young. My dad got remarried when I was 6 or 7 years old to a very domineering woman.
Mm,
And they had a son, my half brother, Ian, who's 8 years younger than me. And so I had this unique perspective of being a witness to a young child being parented in a very controlling, power over, punitive household, and literally watching his little soul
mm,
crumble in front of my eyes. And so I made myself a promise when I was 16 years old that when I had kids, I would learn whatever it took
mhm.
to parent them. I believe the word that I used back then was fairly. It just all seemed very unfair to
Yeah.
me. And so, I'd already, when my kids were little, as I just shared, I'd left my big fancy corporate job. I'd already become a life coach. And yet I wasn't meeting that promise that I made to myself
Mm,
of how I wanted to parent them. I was still losing my temper. My go-to resource at the time was Super Nanny. So I was using timeouts and things that, just
mhm.
didn't feel good to me. Because I had a platform at the time, I started interviewing conscious parenting experts.
Yeah.
Alfie Kohn, who wrote Unconditional Parenting, Poe Bronson, Marshall Rosenberg, who's the creator of Nonviolent Communication, and received a lot of these tools for myself. And in that process, met my co-founder, Jolette Jai, who's really created this whole empowered parenting model that we now certify our coaches in. And so for me, it was a couple things. It was, wanting these tools for myself, wanting to be able to live up to my own ideal as a parent. And then
Mhm.
as a entrepreneurial woman, I know that so many parents are looking for a way to have work that fuels them while still being able to parent in the way that their heart is longing for.
Mm.
And Jai is just such a natural extension of that vision that I have for parents to have that freedom and flexibility. We like to say it's the only job where your parenting makes your job better and your job makes your parenting better.
I love that. So let's go into into that empowered parenting model, because let's just say if I'm going to try to contrast this and do my best, in the past, maybe that authoritarian, very strict, like there was this certain type of model and this ideal parent, and the kids had to be a certain way. And now you believe that, and at Jai, you're training coaches to maybe take a fresh approach or a fresh look at this. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, most of us were parented, and some, everything is on a scale. In
Mhm.
some way, we were parented in the dominant model, right? Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Speak when you're spoken to. Fall in line. Comply. The dominant model works if your goal is
Mhm.
to get compliant children. But the thing about compliant children is very often they turn into either compliant adults or kind of bullying adults, right? Who think that in
Mhm.
order to get their needs met, they need to be the authoritative parent.
Yeah.
And so I believe that this model is actually responsible for so much of the conflict in the world, for people's inability to be in fulfilling,
Mhm.
generous relationships. There is a misconception out there that if we let go of the dominant model, if we're not resorting to punishments or consequences or any sort of manipulation, even bribes, to
Mhm.
get our children to behave, that children are going to become like, it's going to be like bedlam and all hell is going to break loose, and that it's permissive parenting, kids are going to be entitled and spoiled. Well, that's not what we're saying either. There's this whole other way, what we call empowered parenting, which in some ways takes more attention, more presence, more a deeper dive into your own sense of values and how you as a parent emotionally regulate
Mhm.
your own communication skills. But what we've seen over the last decade is that when children are parented in this model where their needs and feelings are just as important and valuable in a family as the parents,
Mhm.
that you create a culture of cooperation, and we're raising the leaders of the future because they haven't been shamed, they haven't lost their voice, they aren't going to diminish their,
Mhm.
what they see wrong in the world in the name of a more powerful person.
Yeah.
And I think that this is so important when we look into solving so many of the problems that quite frankly need to be solved.
No, that's great. And it makes a lot of sense. And I love the way you say, you're really creating tomorrow's leaders. And that is what you're doing, because like what you mentioned in terms of that sliding scale and the way, children react, and the more importantly, what they become in as adults, I mean, has a lot to do with the parenting side of things. So I think it's great what you're doing. I like the model. Let's also get further into the model. So I understand that obviously you're of value and you want to be of value to others, and you've been in coaching, and now of course with Jai Institute you've been training and certifying coaches. Tell us a little bit more about what that looks like.
I think that, from a, sort of a top-down view of it, really what we're looking to do is find people, moms and dads, who share in this mission of really
Mm,
seeing that so many parents want to parent differently. They don't like how it feels to resort to old power over tactics, or to yell, or to, take their child's iPhone away, whatever the thing is, but they don't know how.
mm,
And we get to do that, right? To help people learn these skills of emotional regulation, learn these skills of conscious communication, so that they can actually have the relationship with their kids that they want. And so
mm.
many of our coaches come to us because they want these skills for their own family.
Yeah.
I think our own children, of course, come first. And so that's really the first piece, is that kind of longing for something different, but not quite knowing what that is or what that looks like. And they get to learn that here. The second piece, and this isn't the case for all of
Mhm.
our students, but for most of them, is the idea of having their own business, being self-employed, right? Working with
Mhm.
clients, making a difference in people's lives. I mean, I have the very unique and sometimes humbling perspective of getting to hear all the stories of, the mom who stopped yelling at her kids, or, there's oftentimes like one parent will be authoritative and think like, there's no way we could stop, consequences or timeouts. It's going to be crazy.
Mhm.
And then hearing them get on board and come along, it's quite humbling. And so that real drive helps our students then engage with our training and our curriculum, and get really excited about taking that work out into the world and helping people.
So a lot of parents watching this right now, and they're thinking, and maybe they're looking for resources and different things, and maybe they've bought some books, or they've done some research online and done the normal thing that we do when we want to learn something nowadays. How does somebody know if like Jai is a right fit, or if that's a path they should go down and start considering? Because I would argue it's a little bit more of a commitment, of course, than just picking up a book. And I think the additional effort put into it, I think yields a different type of result.
Yeah.
So how do you think a parent watching this should evaluate whether or not it's something that would work for them?
I think that it's important to recognize that it's really hard to make a change in our kind of the way that we do things without
Mhm.
support, accountability, and coaching. If it were as easy as reading a book, everyone would be rich, thin, and happy in their relationships, But we all have these entrenched ways of doing things and these unconscious patterns of behavior that get in the way, not because anything's wrong with us, but because we're people and this
Mhm.
is how we're wired. And so, it's the rare person that can read a book and make a major change in their life. This is why we have personal trainers at the gym. It's why we go to therapy when we're having marriage issues, because we recognize that it's going to take the help of an expert to actually have what we want. I think with parenting, people often think like, well, this should come naturally to me. I love my child. I should know how to do this. And this is one of the myths that we want to help burst, because what it does is it creates a cycle of guilt and shame that don't actually make anything better. And
Mhm.
so if you can recognize that in yourself and say, you know what? I'm just human. I am doing my best and I want to do the work
Mhm.
to be a better parent, a better mom, or a better dad, then yes, Jai would be a great place to look for support in that.
That's awesome. And so now let's switch to that other side of the opportunity. So for somebody that is looking more for the business side of the opportunity, again, I know they cross over that, as you mentioned. So
Sure.
sometimes somebody comes in because they're looking for resources for themselves, and then they decide, hey, there's an opportunity here too, and maybe I'd like to be of service to others through this model. Let's focus a little bit on the business side of things. So how does somebody really know if that's typically a good fit?
I think that, we have two different skill sets here. There's the
Mhm.
skill set of becoming a great coach,
Yeah.
but becoming a great coach in and of itself does not give you a great coaching business.
Mm.
The skills of having a business, I mean, my goodness, Adam, I'm sure you can relate, right? It takes some grit.
I'm
It
still
takes
learning those skills. Hold on. I'm in there. Hey,
it takes,
just
I
for
always say
everybody watching this, I don't have it figured out. I'm working on it.
I say to our coaches all the time, fail faster, be willing to fall down. You have to have, and then this is why I think mission does matter.
Hmm.
Because if your mission is big enough, you're going to be willing to do it messy. You're going to be willing to have perhaps people not get it or
Yeah.
judge you in ways that feel uncomfortable.
Hmm.
To have a successful business of any kind, discomfort comes along for the ride. There's
Hmm.
just no way that I know of to create success in the world without a willingness to be uncomfortable, to sit in discomfort, and to learn and grow from that discomfort. And so, on the one hand, yes, the passion for parenting that would allow you to, you know, digest and integrate and make the work a part of your life. As leaders, we can't take people down a path that we haven't ourselves walked. It won't
Hmm.
work. And then on top of that, if you want a business as a parenting coach, that kind of I call it like humble ferocity,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like we know that we don't know, and we know that we're going to mess up, and we know we're going to make mistakes, but that continuing to fail forward is what I see really allows the coaches who are flying fastest
Hmm.
to succeed so successfully.
So tell me, how does the certification process work? Like length of time or sessions, or give us more of that.
So our coaching program is 6 months long. We use a small group training model, which I think is one of the biggest differentiators of JIDE to other parent coach
Mm.
training platforms out there. And so we have groups starting all the time. You're with your group for 6 months. You spend the first half of your training going through this content and curriculum as the parent. And so you get to have this transformation for your own family first. Then you spend the second half of the training learning how to coach other people through the process you just went through.
Hmm.
Then you spend a final month with us learning the very foundational skills of sales and marketing, because I can teach you to be the best parenting coach in the world. But without the confidence and clarity to get visible, to start talking to people, to know how to charge and what to charge and all that,
Hmm.
that work ends with you. And I want these 1,000 coaches out like beacons of peace and love in the world. Like the ripples of the ripples of the ripples is what I'm here to do.
That's amazing. And so when I think about when people, maybe watch programs like this, or they see an opportunity or something else, like they may get excited, and then, they may have that little inkling of doubt that kind of comes in their head, and they're like,
Sure.
maybe, well, I don't know if I should be doing that. I don't have all my own stuff figured out. I don't have, which by the way, I grapple with that too. So I'm not picking on anybody else.
Me
I'll pick on
too.
myself here. I mean,
Right.
what kind, like, what, so, hey, so tell me, coach, how do you kind of get over that? Or how do you think about like how to silence that voice, or whatever you'd recommend? Because I see Jai as a great opportunity, but I also, when people shut this off, I don't want them to go back and, just have that little thing that comes up. So how do people get over the worry?
It's so interesting because these voices, right? You're not good enough. You're stupid. Mine, this is embarrassing to admit. Mine is you suck at life. That's the
Mm.
one that like wants to stop me in
Ah.
my tracks. These are the very messages that we got as children that our work is wanting to not create in the children of today for the
Mm.
future. And so part of it is recognizing that that voice is a safety mechanism. It's a message that you got probably as a child that was designed to keep you safe, right? Your parents weren't doing that to you to keep you small or to limit your growth. That was
Mhm.
just a ripple down effect, right? Generation to generation of safety. And so the first thing to do is to recognize that voice, right? Like, okay, I hear you. I may not be like, who am I to think
Yeah.
this? Well, okay, so that's just a voice trying to keep me safe. Is that true?
Mm.
Right? Is it true that doing this is going to create less safety? Well, no, it's going to take some risk, but then we can kind of self-coach ourselves to validate the belief, right? We don't want to make it wrong, to see it for what it is, which is just a safety and defense mechanism, and then to choose from our own discernment and the goals that we have for the future on
Mhm.
the right course forward, because that's a past facing voice. And that's the voice that has gotten us to the circumstances we have today. So if we want something different for tomorrow, that means we have to listen to a different voice today, which is often the voice of inspiration, of excitement, of happiness, of what if. And so we want to start to track ourselves toward that bigger, more expansive voice than the stay small voice of the past.
Oh, I love it. And hey, and I'm inspired. So I know my audience is too right now. I'm like, come on, put me in the game. I'm in.
Yeah,
So
and
this is
so human, those voices, and they really are. When I teach on this, I always teach about it being like a benevolent grandmother. The
mm,
benevolent grandmother would be like, "Oh, honey, have another piece of cake," right? Because she wants us to be happy and safe and nurtured. But that's not going to lead us maybe to our goal of health or
yeah.
fitness. And so it's just a pattern recognition, really.
So let's talk about going back to the business side a bit. Let's talk about like earning potential, or I don't know, share some success stories with me. I mean, I know you've been training coaches for a long time. You've had a lot of
Training
people come
coaches
through
for
your
a long
program, not
time.
just parents that for themselves, but also on the business side. I mean, tell
Yeah.
me some of those stories.
Yeah, it's interesting because, coaches come into our program for, let's just say students, they're not coaches yet, come into our program for different reasons. So there's definitely some who just want the training for their own family. They
Mm-hmm.
feel that getting this training as a coach is the most advanced kind of parent training that they can get for their own kids. And that's
Yeah.
great, right? That's fine. Some people come into our program, they're homeschooling or they have young children at home who aren't in school. They want to be really present for their kids. And so their intention is to have part-time income,
Yeah.
work with 3 or 4 families a month, bring in an extra, say $2,000 to $5,000 a month for their family. That's enough. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have coaches who want to replace full-time corporate income. So
Yeah.
one of our favorite coaches is Dr. Tiffany Noonan. Her business is Epic Parenting, and she was in one of our first training cohorts way back in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Tiffany is a pediatrician,
Yeah.
and she was giving her whole life to her practice. When she had her 2 boys, it was really hitting hard. In fact, the story that she tells is one day she fell in an appointment with a
Mm.
patient, broke her arm, and continued to see patients the entire rest of the day
Wow.
without complaining because she was a pediatrician. And so she replaced her income as a doctor with her, now 5-year
Mm-hmm.
plus parenting practice. But we have coaches like that, that are
Mm.
have successfully replaced their employed income with coaching practice. And then we have what I call our empire builders, right? Our entrepreneurs who are writing books, who are morphing the work, who have huge social media followings. An example of this would be Lisa Smith. Her business is called The Peaceful Parent. She has a bigger social media following than we do, and just a huge, successful, and impactful business.
Oh, that's amazing. And these are great stories. And that's why I had to have you share, because I know you're doing a lot of good over there. And I know you want to do more good. So you mentioned it earlier in the program, but I do want to circle back to it. So this big goal of 1,000 coaches certified. What led to this?
I started Jai with a co-founder back in 2011, and we went our separate ways in 2013. In 2019, I bought the business back from her. And in
Mm.
those in between years, I've been being a marketer and a catalyst for other thought leaders that have great work to share with the world.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to bring those skills back to Jai when I bought the business back in 2019 has just been the most humbling. Life is amazing, and it's really incredible to experience the perfection of even hard things. When I left Jai in 2013, I was devastated, heartbroken. It was like my baby was getting taken from me. And so to have it come back and in these ensuing years have developed all these skills of marketing and
Mhm.
traffic and SEO and all the things that I've been doing in the meantime has just been like, oh my gosh, like life is so brilliant. I can't even believe the perfection of all of it. And it just gives me such a like focus of, okay, like life brought me these gifts. I'm humbled to my knees by the
Mhm.
work that we do here at Jai. And so I am giving this my everything by certifying 1,000 new coaches. First of all, we give those 1,000 moms and dads the ability to create freedom and flexibility and to learn these skills for their family so they can have businesses doing this very important work. Secondly, all of the families that work with all of those coaches are going to be changed in untold ways. We're breaking intergenerational patterns of trauma, of dysfunctional communication, of shame, of guilt, of violence through
Mhm.
this work. And then the ripple effect of all those families, because when a family's at a playground and perhaps has that more dominant model, and they simply bear witness to a dad meeting his son in compassion and empathy,
Mm.
I think that changes something. And so that's the ripples upon ripples upon ripples that, yeah, that's what gets me out of bed every morning.
Oh, that's wonderful, and I mean, what an amazing story of not just entrepreneurship, but also doing good in the world and paying it forward, and really creating and these kids, like all the kids that benefit from this. I mean,
Oh,
when you so 1,000 coaches equals a lot. That ripple
a
effect you just
lot.
said
And
could equal tens of
yeah,
thousands of children long term. That's amazing. It's an amazing story.
thank you.
So Kiva, that being said, if somebody is watching this and they want to learn more about Jai because either they're a parent looking for some resources for themselves, or they're parent and maybe a business builder, or maybe, hey, they're one of those enterprise builders that have a large income that they want to replace, and
Yeah.
maybe they just happen to just be in that spot where they're like where you were at originally, and maybe this wasn't the only thing, but you're saying, hey, I would come home after this job and my kids were at the beach with the nanny, and I'm like, I want to be at the beach too. So I feel like there's some people that are watching this that really fit in those categories. What's the best way for them to follow up with you and your team and to learn more about Jai?
You should just really go to our main website, which is jaiinstituteforparenting.com, JAI. There's so much information there. There's an application if you are interested in becoming certified as a parenting coach. The first step is to fill out that very short application and then schedule a call with a member of our admissions team. But if you're looking for a coach, we also have a whole directory there of all of our hundreds upon hundreds of coaches all over the world. They're sorted by specialty. And so that's a great place to start as well.
Fantastic. Well, Kiva, really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing more about your background and your entrepreneurial journey and all the great work that you're doing over at Jai. And to the audience, as always, don't forget, hit that subscribe button. Hope you really enjoyed this. Hope you learned a lot. If you did, we got some more great guests coming up for you. Don't want you to miss a thing. Hit that subscribe button. And Kiva, thanks again for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Truly my pleasure as well. Thank you, Adam.